Oh, okay.
I would love to introduce Lee. Yeah, Lee. To be honest, I've only known Lee about 9 months, but what a 9 months it's been! It's been amazing. I'm really, I have to say, I've made a friend for life in Lee. He's a really good guy. Lee and I network together through BNI Networking, which is another great opportunity for businesses to grow. And I've seen Lee's results in the email marketing arena. Lee's one of the good guys. And Lee's been doing this for over 15 years, haven't you, Lee? So I know, we can all sort of look at some of these online things like MailChimp and that type of thing, but Lee is the real expert. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Lee sharing some nuggets with us today. So yeah, you crack on, Lee. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Lee. Wow, I mean, what an introduction. First of all, I'd just like to say how much I'm thoroughly enjoying this webinar today. It's been fascinating. As Steve mentioned there, I've been in business, running this business for 16 years now. I truly believe that if I'd had something like this in place early doors, I could have saved myself maybe 3 or 4 years. I was literally learning as I went. And it's quite fitting that I should follow on from Steve, because where Steve focuses on websites and SEO, which helps you advertise yourself to people looking for your products or services, email marketing kind of does the reverse of that and helps you go and find those people who might want your products or services, or you feel may benefit from what you're offering. Email marketing essentially is quite a broad term, but it is essentially the act of sending a commercial message, typically to a group of people using, of course, email. In its very broadest sense, every email sent to a potential client or customer could be considered email marketing. And it involves using email to send advertisements, to request business, to solicit sales, or even donations. The various forms of email marketing, it is very most common use, I'd say, would be newsletters to existing databases. So this is where, again, as Steve mentioned, you've got your places like MailChimp, Aweber, and other places that are very similar, where you go to them with your own list, your existing list of customers, and you market to them as frequently as you like, usually for a fixed monthly fee. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got essentially lead generation email marketing, and this is where you go out with essentially a cold reach. So you're looking to target businesses that probably don't even know you yet exist, and you're doing that to solicit sales and to advertise your wares. And this is what we do, and this is where my expertise comes in. I've been running Merry Hill now for 16 years, as I say, but I've actually been email marketing for nearer 20 years. In my previous business, the vast majority of leads we brought in were via email marketing, and that's when it was in its infancy. It was quite new, and it was so successful that I decided to make a career out of it, and it was the best decision I ever made. And it's been a fascinating journey, and I love what I do, and I love watching businesses grow around me. So obviously these days it's a much more difficult process than it used to be in terms of getting a result and getting the stats that you want from an email marketing campaign. They say that the average worker receives up to 90 emails a day. So obviously it's important when you're running an email campaign that your message stands out and grabs the attention. If you do get it right, they do say, well, 73%, the last count of marketers say that email marketing is the number one platform for return on investment. And they say that for every £1 spent, you can expect £44 in return, of course, when done correctly. So there's a few different things you need to look at when you're arranging an email campaign, especially from a lead generation viewpoint. Obviously, with a newsletter, again, you can be a lot more relaxed, shall we say. You're already talking to an audience that knows you, they know what to expect. When you're doing it from a lead generation viewpoint, you're looking to bring in new customers, new sales. The overriding and most important thing is the message. I've written many blogs on this. Data, there's lots of good data out there, but you can get away with bad data. Not that we'd condone that, of course. The data that we use is all above board and high quality data. The way in which you send your emails, there's millions of different ways to do that, as I touched on earlier. But again, the most important thing for any email marketing campaign is the message. Content is king. So what should you be looking at when you're constructing your email? So the first thing to look at is your target audience, of course. So you might have a very specific audience of who you feel is going to benefit from the products or service you're offering. And you can, if it's less obvious, a good way of identifying your target audience, if you're not so sure, is look at the last 10 invoices that you issued and who were they to, and what's the common theme there. It might be a particular sector, it might be a particular demographic. So look at your target audience and bear in mind when writing your email who you're talking to. So you might want to word certain sentences in a particular way that would read well with your target audience. The next thing to identify is your differentiator. So again, if we're talking about a cold campaign, you're essentially talking to people that don't yet know you. So what makes you stand out? What makes you different to your competitors? Or in a lot of cases to their current supplier. Obviously, if you're going out with a product or a service that's quite widely used, most people have in place already, then you've got to make it clear why they should consider using you or to come to you for a quote. We'd always recommend, rather than obviously, attacking what the current supplier might be doing, focus instead on what you think you can do better. What makes you different? It's always good, of course, to go with an irresistible offer. We all love an offer, we all love a bargain, but make it appropriate. Again, I wrote a blog on this quite recently. You see lots of campaigns going out there, cold email campaigns, talking about 25% off this or half price on this. If the reader of your email doesn't know you, they've put no value on what you're offering. So 25% off something that they have no value on whatsoever means absolutely nothing to them. So come up with an offer that's appropriate to the audience. You might have already identified a problem that you're solving with your email, with the product you're offering. So tie the offer into that. And then also offer a guarantee. This is quite standard stuff. Next day delivery, returns accepted within a certain amount of time, but also offer a punishment for that guarantee if you were to fail on that guarantee. So what will you do essentially to yourself if you can't offer that guarantee? For example, next day delivery or your money back. That would be a bit extreme, but that's an example. And give the reason as to why you're able to offer that guarantee and the punishment. So for example, we know we're efficient enough to handle this, and we want you to have peace of mind when ordering with us. Social proof is always a big one. Obviously that's more difficult for a startup. But the quicker you can start building up social proof, the better. So when we say social proof, we're talking about testimonials, we're talking about reviews, we're talking about accreditations, later down the line, maybe awards that you've won. Reviews in particular, we'd always recommend pointing clients to Trustpilot, Facebook reviews, Google reviews, any independent site that displays reviews. Of course, it's always good to show these on your website, but they don't pack as much as a punch if it's just text essentially entered into a website. And the subject line, of course, that always needs considering. That's essentially the first thing that your reader is going to see. We always like to recommend using an attention-seeking headline and pre-header. But keep it elusive. So make it appropriate to the content that's going to be within the email. So they've got a rough idea of what to expect, but keep it elusive enough that they kind of need to open the email to fully digest what's on offer. Too many companies out there, they either give away too much in the email, which enables you to make an instant decision before you even read the content. You might actually miss something. Or they go way too elusive, where they use a subject line that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the content inside. And then once you get inside the email, you've kind of got an instant resentment towards the sender. So that kind of sets you off on the wrong foot straight away. So be on point, be appropriate, but also be elusive. And then what I'd say is the most important part of any email message, you could probably apply this to any form of advertising really, or the features and benefits. It's quite tempting when you're writing any message or running any advertising campaign to talk primarily about what you do, how you do it, why you do it, the best way you do it, how long you've been doing it for, blah, blah, blah. It is of no interest whatsoever to the reader. What the reader wants to know, how does it benefit them? Does it save them money? Does it make them money? Does it make them more efficient? Highlight the problem that you're solving with your products and service and lead with that. That is the biggest piece of advice I could give you of email marketing. And then, of course, a call to action is probably the secondary most important thing. There's no point in doing all that work and getting somebody to read your email. They're fully bought into the idea of what you're offering, and then you need a strong call to action. Make it easy for them to contact you. So give them multiple options. So, for example, we'll as standard lead with calls on this number. Contact us via our website with, of course, a link to the website, or reply to this email. So they've got 3 options there. And then let them know what will happen when they do that. So, for example, reply to this email and we'll get back to you within 2 working days. So that's your message constructed. Now, the beauty of an email campaign is, as with any advertising effort, it won't always go to plan. You won't always get the results you want. Sometimes you'll be blown out of the water with the results. But for those times when you don't get the results that you want, the beauty of email marketing is the stats that you get back. And that's across the board. So that's, again, if you're running a newsletter through Aweber or MailChimp, or you're using a company like Maryhill for a managed email campaign, you get the stats back. So obviously you can look at how many emails have been delivered, you can look at how many emails were opened, how many links were clicked, how many times they were clicked, which links were clicked, and then even beyond that you can filter your audience down, so you can see, was there a particular demographic of your audience that were more likely to open the email? Or were they more likely to open it, but then they weren't clicking through, so maybe a bit of work's needed on the content. Vice versa, was the open rate lower than you were expecting, but you saw a great click-through rate, meaning we got the content right, but we maybe need to address the subject line. And the beauty of that is that you can then use that information to build your next campaign. You can take that, you can look at what's worked, and you know exactly what you need to work on. And it's trial and error, as with anything. So that's essentially an email message. That's what I've got prepared so far, but I'd love to answer any questions or anything that anybody feels I've obviously missed that could be of relevance.
I'll certainly jump in. And if we've got any questions from the audience, please, Steve or Fabio or myself, we'll read them out for you. Email marketing. I love a few statistics. What's the average open rate when you send an email nowadays? You're going to say depends, but I'm ready for it.
It depends. No, it's obviously, again, so for example, if I send out a newsletter or a blog to my existing database, your open rates can be anywhere between 25 and 40%.
Wow.
So it's a massive open rates. When we run a cold email marketing campaign for a client, we're typically aiming for anywhere between 8 and 12%. Anything over 12%, we've decided over the years is a great result. You do have to bear in mind in the modern era that an open rate that you get back is always a worst case figure. So a lot of us don't have our images set to automatically download when we receive an email. So if you're not downloading images, we can't track your open. The open tracker is done by a pixel within the email, which essentially acts as an image. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. So for example, we do a lot of campaigns where we have, for example, we have a client, he goes into schools and does clay days. So he goes and does making stuff with clay, what have you. Schools generally as standard don't have images set to download, so they'll always return a low open rate, but the results are fantastic. So we know that we might be seeing a 4% open rate, but we know in reality it might be closer to a 20% open rate, just by the results that we see that he gets.
Do you still get excited with every time? I certainly do. Every time I send an email, I get excited to see the results, like a nervous, excited feeling. Does that still count for somebody who's been doing it as long as you have?
Yeah, I love what I do, and I love it when we bring on a new client. I love it when we bring on a new client with a product or service that I'm excited about, that was something we've not tried before, which obviously these days is quite a rare thing. It's quite rare that we get to do something for the first time. But when we do, and I've got a lot of confidence in it, I'm very, very interested to see how it goes, and I love doing it. And I love running my own emails as well. Like I've mentioned a few times, that over the last year I've got into writing blogs, which I then use for an email campaign to my own list. That's always a great thing.
Well, everybody viewing, say they want to join your subscription, because growing your email is a massive thing. How would people today join your subscription list?
Well, my own list is actually just prospects and clients that we already speak to. So you'd automatically, as a business, be in that list anyway. But people can feel free to contact me directly to be added to that list, or just follow me on LinkedIn, where the blogs, I always post the blogs.
Do you find those pop-ups that are on websites, subscribe here, annoying, that they follow you around, or are they super effective? Really, what my question should be is, what's your best way of getting new emails onto your subscription list?
Yeah, so for a subscription list, I think you just touched on it there. It's just getting it out there. It's spending the money to get people in the first place to your site or to your social media page, which obviously is the sort of thing that Steve could help you with, and just giving people as much opportunity as possible and as much reason as possible to subscribe to your list. It's the more you can get the name out there, the better.
Fabio, Steve, I've got some questions from the audience as well. Over to you guys.
I was going to ask Lee about the data, because obviously the data for me, I think is key as to we can all get a free email list off our mates and find one on the internet that you can download. Obviously GDPR has sort of affected that, but I know you keep your data, it's key to your business, isn't it? So how do you sort of verify your data? How good's your data?
So we from day one we've stuck to what we're good at. So we never really got into the whole data side of things. We let the data experts do that. So we've worked with the same two data providers pretty much since day one. One of which is one of the underbellies, if you like, of the 118 group, which we're all familiar with. So they supply us with data on an annual license. We get monthly replenishments, and we also, so it comes to us clean, and then we internally clean it as well. I do that with inverted commas because it's quite a broad term, cleaning, but essentially we're filtering out the data that we know isn't great and that we know is out of date. But funnily enough, one of the most common questions we get asked is how new is the data, and there always seems to be a lot of relevance put on how new data is, which we quickly kind of brush aside, because obviously, for example, my email address is over 15 years old, but it's as valid now as it was then. So to me, it's the delivery rates that you need to be focusing on rather than how new the data is. Typically speaking, in our industry, an accepted bounce rate, and a bounce is obviously when an email doesn't successfully deliver. You have two different types of bounces. You have a hard bounce, which essentially means the email address doesn't exist anymore, and you have a soft bounce, which is usually when the email's been rejected because of a spam filter or something like that. The accepted bounce rate in our industry is anything up to 10%. We typically see bounce rates of around 1.5%. And that's generally always soft bounces. They're rejected for whatever settings.
A typo or something.
That shows how good the data is, then, doesn't it?
Yeah. And another thing that I should have touched on as well is the one good metric for a good email campaign is your unsubscribe rate. People sometimes laugh when I say this, but a low unsubscribe rate is the first sign of a bad email campaign. Typically we want to be seeing around 1% of every email marketing campaign unsubscribe, and if you get that essentially means that the email, first of all, it's making its way into the inbox, but it's being read and it's being understood, and then the person on the other end of that chain is deciding they don't want any more, which of course is fine. If you see a low unsubscribe rate, it can be quite easy to assume that that's great, I've sent out a message that everybody loves. But that's not the case. There are always going to be people who don't want your product or service, they've got no interest whatsoever, or they just don't want to receive emails. So that's always the first thing I look at, is the unsubscribe rate.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I remember thinking back years ago, and I mean probably about 12 to 15 years ago, I bought an email database list off eBay, and it was 3.5 million email addresses. And I thought, this is going to be great. I can email all these people instantly, and they'll all love what I send them, and they'll all buy off me, and I'll be rich and famous. And surprisingly, it didn't work. So yeah, and I've got to say, Lee's cost for these kind of send outs, these campaigns are really, really good. And I know, Lee, you've had clients with you since day one, haven't you? And people don't stick around if it doesn't work. So it's a great testament that email marketing, still works, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in a recent meeting we had our second biggest ever month in March, and 90% of that business was repeat business. Generally speaking, over the years, it's 85% repeat, 15% new, which is kind of where I like it to be. But yeah, as you say, it's generally those who persisted early on, because it doesn't always go the exact way you want it first time. But those that persist until we find that right message, it works out for them. As you say, our biggest client today is also the first client that I landed all those years ago from a cold call from an old Dun & Bradstreet directory.
And the good old days.
We've just watched them grow as we've grown, and it's been a fantastic journey.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, that doesn't happen if it doesn't work. So definitely.
Yeah.
And would you encourage people to do repeat campaigns and keep the same message? We all talk about the number of touch points that a customer needs before they make a decision. Just because you send it once and it doesn't get the results what you initially want, I assume you keep sending them out, change the message, tweak the message, do your A/B testing, that type of thing, and just
so I'd say
get the right one.
Early doors, I'd definitely encourage lots of testing, lots of split testing, trying different messages. And I think once you've found a message that works, I always tell my clients that I've never been a fan of change for the sake of change. So if a campaign performs month after month after month, it's then why would you change it? We have a client, for example, he comes into your offices and picks up your old hardware and destroys all it, in a secure fashion and what have you. He's been running the same campaign now for 11 years. I think the only thing that's changed in that time is his phone number, but the message itself is exactly the same. But it's even got to the point where people will reply to that email and say, I've been waiting for your email to come around again, because now I've got some stuff for you. So it's kind of building.
Lee, there's a question from the audience, and we're going to have to transition over to Josh, but it's from a lady called Rihanna, one of my team as well. Is there anything you've done in the past which has led to people unsubscribing that we can avoid now? And how often should you be sending out emails?
I suppose in terms of the avoiding unsubscribes, again, I mean, you wouldn't
Have you done anything really wrong that's made your unsubscribes crash?
Yeah, we've done a few. We tried a few controversial campaigns, shall we say, in the past. I do remember one, and I can't. There was something about sales, and I think the headline was, "Is your sales like pulling teeth out?" And we had a horrific image of a dentist ripping somebody's tooth out. This was a long time ago, and I don't even know how it got approved. But the client wanted it, and we ran with it. And let's just say the feedback wasn't good. So I suppose avoid anything too controversial. In terms of timings and frequency, I'd say that would depend on the size of your audience first and foremost. So obviously, if you're only dealing with a small audience, then try and keep it to bi-weekly or monthly. And of course, how appropriate it is to be constantly pushing the product or service that we're talking about. So, for example, the hardware recycling chap that I mentioned, it's appropriate for him to keep cycling around the database because it's something that you might not need at the time you first receive the email, but 3 or 4 times down, you might have something for him to come and collect. They're the campaigns where we're relying on the email landing at the right time, whereas you have some emails that you're trying to kind of provoke an interest, something that they might not have considered that they wanted, but they see your email and they think, oh, actually, yeah, that could be a benefit. So there's 2 sides of the coin there with timings.
Brilliant. You've had me captivated, and I'm sure whoever's tuning in, if you're a new business, you really need... I wish I'd collected every email of every person I've ever met and had it on a database. That would make a big difference. So just the last question, Lee, before we say bye-bye, is how do people contact you, number 1? And number 2, your COVID experience of the last year. Have you got any positive things that have come out of it, or any lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, we contact me via the website. Probably is this maryhill.co.uk, and that's Maryhill with an E in the middle, not a Y. And there's one regret that we had. COVID, on a personal level, has taught me that when the proverbial hits the fan, I can do what's needed to be done in terms of my team. I've got 12 staff. My first point of call a year ago was keeping them motivated, keeping everybody upbeat, reminding them that we're still here to provide a service for our clients, and that's what we did. And then during the second half of lockdown last year, we saw open rates higher than ever. Essentially, people were chained to the desk a lot more. So once we've gone through the hard work of convincing clients to keep promoting, we and our clients reaped the benefits of that. So yeah, so it's been a good experience for me personally. I've learned a lot about myself in the last year, and it's all good stuff.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate that. It was great delivery.